I used to think the awkward part would be seeing Maya again after the storm. What I had not prepared for was how quickly awkwardness could turn into anticipation. 3 days after the night I slept on her sofa, I stepped into the elevator carrying a grocery bag and found Maya already inside. She wore a dark green coat, her hair loosely tied back, one hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup. For half a second, neither of us spoke. It was absurd. We had spent hours talking while snow buried the city, yet suddenly we seemed incapable of discussing an elevator ride. Maya recovered first. "Morning, Claire." "Maya." Her mouth curved slightly. "Very formal. It is your name." "Good." I was worried the wine had erased it. I looked at the glowing floor numbers. The wine did not erase anything. The moment the words left me, I realized how much they admitted. Maya noticed too. Her expression softened, but she spared me by taking a sip of coffee. "So," she said, "have you decided whether you still hate me?" I turned toward her. "I believe we established that your personality remains under review." She laughed, and something inside me relaxed at the sound. "How long is the review period?" "Indefinite. There have been procedural delays." "Naturally." The elevator doors opened on our floor, but neither of us moved immediately. Then Maya gestured toward the hallway. "After you." We walked the few yards toward our apartments, our doors waiting opposite each other with the familiar stretch of hallway between them. Before the storm, that distance had felt perfectly reasonable. Now it seemed strangely deliberate, as though the building itself had drawn a line I was no longer certain I wanted. Maya stopped at her door. "I am glad you got your lock situation fixed." "So am I. I prefer entering my home without requiring humanitarian assistance." "You were not that difficult to rescue." "I was not rescued. You were freezing in a hallway. Temporarily inconvenienced." Maya smiled. "Of course." She unlocked her door then glanced back. "Have a good day, Claire." "You too." Her door closed. Mine remained unopened because I was still standing there with my keys in my hand. I told myself I was thinking about groceries. Instead, I was remembering warm lamplight, wine glasses, the quiet sound of Maya talking after midnight, and the blanket I had found over me near dawn. I finally entered my apartment and placed the groceries on the counter. Everything was exactly where I had left it. Orderly, familiar, quiet. For years, those three qualities had been enough to make a place feel safe. That morning, they felt slightly incomplete. Then I noticed something protruding from the side pocket of my grocery bag. A small paperback book. Not mine. I pulled it free and stared at the worn cover until recognition arrived. I had been holding it in Maya's apartment during the storm. Somehow I had brought it home. Returning it would take less than 30 seconds. I stood there considerably longer, wondering why I was already rehearsing what I would say when I knocked on her door. The book stayed on my kitchen counter until nearly 7 that evening, which was impressive considering Maya lived approximately 12 feet from my front door. I passed it several times while putting away groceries, answering emails, and preparing dinner, each time pretending its return required careful scheduling. Eventually I picked it up and crossed the hallway before I could invent another administrative obstacle. Maya answered after my second knock, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair still damp as if she had just showered. "Claire." There was genuine surprise in her voice, followed by that familiar hint of amusement. I held out the paperback. Apparently I committed accidental literary theft during the storm. Maya looked at the book, then at me. "I wondered where that went." "You could have asked. I thought you might be reading it." "Without permission?" "You filed a noise complaint against me. I assumed we had a complicated relationship with boundaries." I stared at her for 1 second before laughing despite myself. Maya grinned and took the book. That should have been the end of the visit. 30 seconds exactly as predicted. I even shifted my weight toward my apartment. Then Maya said, "I made too much soup." I glanced past her toward the kitchen. "That sounds like a portion control problem." "It is. A serious one. I may need assistance." "Professional assistance?" "Neighborly assistance." There was no storm now. No missing key. No freezing hallway offering me an excuse. I could simply say goodnight and walk 12 feet home. Instead I heard myself ask, "What kind of soup?" Maya stepped aside. "Come investigate." Her apartment felt different without snow pressing against the windows. Familiar somehow, which bothered me more than unfamiliar would have. A low song played from a speaker near the kitchen, quiet enough that I could hear the simmering pot. Maya handed me a bowl and raised an eyebrow. Before you ask, the music is at a management-approved volume. I was not going to ask. You were thinking it. You have become alarmingly confident about my thoughts. Only the predictable ones. We ate at her small table. The soup was better than I intended to admit. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. We talked about a ridiculous email Maya had received at work, the novel I had accidentally borrowed, and whether cilantro improved food or merely announced itself aggressively. Nothing important happened. That was precisely what made the evening important. During the storm, circumstances had kept me there. This time nothing did. At 8:15 I finally stood. Thank you for the soup. Thank you for preventing leftovers. At her door, Maya handed me a small container. For tomorrow. I accepted it. You realize this creates another object I will eventually have to return. Her eyes brightened. That does sound inconvenient. I looked at the container, then at Maya, and understood the trap was so transparent it could hardly qualify as one. The unsettling part was that I did not mind. Back inside my apartment, I placed the container in the refrigerator and caught myself smiling. The book had been returned. Somehow, I had come home carrying another reason to knock on her door. The container spent exactly one night in my refrigerator, before I decided that keeping it any longer would constitute poor manners. That was the explanation I gave myself anyway. The following evening I washed it, dried it, and carried it across the hall. Maya opened the door holding her phone between her shoulder and ear. I will call you back, she said into it, then looked at me. My container survived. Barely. It endured refrigeration, dish soap, and an unnecessarily thorough inspection. Maya laughed. You could have left it outside my door. That would be uncivilized. Naturally. I handed it over, expecting another brief exchange, but Maya glanced toward my open apartment door. I have been curious. That sentence rarely ends well. What does your place actually look like? I followed her gaze. 4 years, my apartment had been the one space requiring no negotiation with another person. Every lamp, book, chair, and wineglass existed exactly where I wanted it. Inviting Maya inside should have been insignificant. She lived 12 feet away. Somehow it did not feel insignificant at all. You may look, I said. But I reserve the right to defend my organizational choices. Maya blinked. Was that an invitation? Do not make me withdraw it. She immediately set the container inside her apartment and followed me across the hall. I stepped aside at my doorway, and for the first time Maya Collins entered my home. She stopped just inside, taking in the cream-colored walls, dark wood shelves, neatly arranged books, and kitchen counters that contained almost nothing unnecessary. Wow! I folded my arms. Choose your next words carefully. I was going to say elegant. You were going to say sterile. I was going to say your throw pillows look like they have performance reviews. I laughed before I could stop myself. Maya wandered toward the bookshelf but did not touch anything. I noticed that. She teased my order yet respected it. You alphabetize your novels? She asked. Some people enjoy finding things. Some people enjoy adventure. Losing your belongings is not adventure. You lost your keys. I pointed toward the door. The tour can end immediately. Maya raised both hands. I apologize. She was still smiling. I offered coffee, mostly because sending her home after 5 minutes suddenly seemed unnecessarily abrupt. Maya chose a blue ceramic mug from the cabinet, one I rarely used. We sat in the living room, and what began as coffee became an hour of conversation about books, terrible apartment furniture, and the differences between what she called a playlist and what I stubbornly called a collection of songs. When Maya finally stood to leave, she carried her empty mug toward the sink. Leave it, I said. I will wash it. She placed it beside the faucet. Thank you for letting me see the fortress. Do not spread rumors. I have a reputation. After her door closed across the hall, I returned to the kitchen. The blue mug sat beside my sink, ordinary and slightly out of place. I could have washed it immediately. Instead, I left it there until morning, A small piece of disorder that, for reasons I was not prepared to examine, did not bother me at all. The blue mug became Maya's without either of us deciding it. The next time she came over, I reached for it automatically. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "Assign seating for beverages now?" she asked. "You chose it. Once. Consistency prevents chaos. Claire, it is a mug. That is how chaos begins." By then, almost 2 weeks had passed since the storm, and our doors had developed a strange new rhythm. On Monday, Maya knocked because she had ordered too much Thai food. On Wednesday, I crossed the hall because I had opened a bottle of wine that, according to me, should not be wasted. Maya pointed out that wine came with corks for precisely that problem. I chose not to reward the observation. Friday, she appeared holding a small bakery box. "Emergency," she announced. "What happened?" "I bought 4 pastries." "That is not an emergency. There is only one of me." I looked at the box. "You deliberately purchased 4. Your accusations are hurtful." 20 minutes later, she was sitting at my kitchen counter while I made coffee. Somewhere along the way, visits stopped requiring negotiation. A knock came, a door opened, and one of us crossed the 12 feet between our apartments. Sometimes Maya brought dinner. Sometimes I cooked. Once I carried half a chicken pot pie to her apartment because I had made too much, although I had been cooking for one person for years without accidentally producing food for 2. Maya wisely did not mention that. The excuses grew thinner. One evening she knocked simply to ask whether I had seen a movie she wanted to watch. "Is this a survey?" I asked. "No. I need someone with strong opinions." "You have come to the correct apartment." We watched it at her place and disagreed about the ending for 40 minutes afterward. Another night, I heard 3 quick knocks and opened my door to find Maya holding her phone. "You need to hear this song." Need is an ambitious word. 3 minutes. She came inside. 3 minutes became an hour. The strangest part was not how often Maya appeared in my apartment. It was how quickly the apartment adjusted around her. The blue mug moved to the front of the cabinet. A sparkling water she liked began appearing in my refrigerator. Her preferred seat became the right side of my sofa without discussion. Meanwhile, a novel of mine remained on her coffee table because she was halfway through it, and a bottle of wine I liked somehow acquired a permanent place in her kitchen. None of it felt planned. That would have alarmed me. Instead, it felt practical, which was the word I used whenever I did not want to examine something more closely. One Saturday afternoon, Maya knocked while I was chopping vegetables. I opened the door and found her empty-handed. No food. No book. No container. No phone held out with a song waiting. "What did you forget?" I asked. Maya considered the question. "Nothing." "What are you returning?" "Nothing." "Do you require assistance?" "No," she smiled almost cautiously. "I was just wondering what you were doing." For the first time there was no excuse at all. I looked back toward my kitchen, then at Maya. "I am making dinner." "Sounds serious." I stepped aside and opened the door wider. "It will be, if you keep distracting the cook." Maya walked in. Only after I closed the door did I realize neither of us had needed a reason anymore. Music entered my apartment differently once Maya stopped needing permission to bring it with her. That Saturday, while I finished dinner, she sat on the kitchen counter with her blue mug between both hands and quietly changed the song playing from her phone. "You know this one," she said. "I know several songs." "This one." I listened for a few seconds. Unfortunately, she was right. "You have played it repeatedly enough to qualify as psychological conditioning." Maya smiled. "What is the chorus?" I refused to participate in this experiment. "Claire." "Maya." She waited. I kept slicing tomatoes. Then, without thinking, I hummed several notes under my breath. The kitchen went suspiciously quiet. I looked up. Maya was staring at me with delighted disbelief. "Do not. You like it." "I recognize it." "You were humming." Recognition sometimes has symptoms. Maya laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. 2 days later, a message arrived from her while I was working. She had sent me a playlist with the title Claire's Continuing Musical Education. I stared at it for a full minute before replying that the title was condescending. Maya responded that she had considered Claire Discovers This Century, but decided to show restraint. I informed her that restraint was not a quality anyone had ever associated with her. Then I returned to work and deliberately ignored the playlist until that evening. At 7:30, alone in my apartment, I opened it. I told myself I was curious about what Maya considered educational. The first song was familiar. The second was not terrible. The third had a piano line I liked enough to replay. By the fifth, I had stopped pretending this was research. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the sofa, and let the music continue. What surprised me was not that I enjoyed some of it. What surprised me was how clearly each song carried Maya into the room. I could imagine which parts she would sing badly, where she would tap her fingers against her mug, which lyric would make her say, "Listen to this," as though I had not been listening already. The next afternoon, I was rinsing my coffee cup when someone knocked. I opened the door, still quietly humming the piano melody from the night before. Maya stood there holding a paper bag. Her eyebrows rose immediately. I stopped. Was that track 3? No, Claire. There are thousands of songs containing pianos. You listened to my playlist. I sampled it. You replayed track 3. I narrowed my eyes. You have no evidence. Maya walked past me toward the kitchen, smiling like a detective who had solved an embarrassingly simple case. I brought sandwiches. I reached into the cabinet and took down 2 mugs, including the blue one, before she asked. Maya noticed that too, but this time she said nothing. I started coffee while her playlist played softly from my speaker. That was another change I did not examine closely enough. It was no longer Maya bringing music into my apartment. I had turned it on before she arrived. And when she sat at the counter, wrapped both hands around the mug I now thought of as hers, the music no longer sounded like something coming from the apartment next door. It sounded as though it belonged exactly where it was. By then, Maya no longer looked like a visitor in my apartment. She would sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked, one foot moving absently to whatever music was playing, and I would complain that countertops were designed for appliances rather than people. She would remind me that I owned approximately 3 appliances and enough empty counter space to land a small aircraft. I never won that argument. One Thursday evening, she arrived looking unusually tired. She smiled when I opened the door, but it was the polite version of her smile, the one that stopped before reaching her eyes. A month earlier, I would not have known the difference. Long day? I asked. I have had shorter years. She attempted a laugh. I stepped aside without asking whether she wanted to come in. Maya entered and dropped onto her usual end of the sofa. I went to the kitchen, poured sparkling water into the blue mug because Maya insisted everything tasted better from it, and brought it to her. I did not ask for this. I am aware. She looked at the mug, then at me. You are getting dangerously thoughtful. Do not spread that around. I returned to the kitchen and finished dinner while Maya rested. I did not question her about work. Eventually, she came to sit at the counter and began telling me about a project that had consumed her entire afternoon. I listened, occasionally asking a question, mostly letting her empty the day out of herself. After dinner, she stretched across the sofa while I read. Music played softly. 20 minutes passed without either of us speaking. Once, silence had been the thing I protected most fiercely. I had believed another person inevitably disturbed it. Maya had somehow disproved that without trying. Her presence did not fill the silence. It changed its temperature. This is weird, Maya said suddenly. I lowered my book. What is? We have been sitting here without talking for 20 minutes. Some of us consider that an achievement. I usually hate quiet. I am aware. She smiled. But this quiet is nice. I looked back at my book because the alternative was acknowledging how precisely she had named what I was feeling. A few evenings later, I found myself in Maya's apartment while she attempted to teach me how to send a voice message instead of typing. I know how telephones work, I said. Your phone is smarter than you allow it to be. That sounds like propaganda from the technology industry. Maya laughed and leaned closer, showing me the screen. I caught the faint clean scent of her shampoo and became strangely conscious of how little space separated us. I shifted my attention deliberately to the phone. You press this, she explained. Revolutionary. You are impossible. And yet you keep knocking. Maya looked at me after saying it. The teasing faded for one quiet second. Neither of us moved. Then I lifted the phone between us. Your tutorial is deteriorating. Her smile returned, softer this time. Right. Later, walking the 12 feet back to my apartment, I told myself the strange pause had meant nothing. What mattered, I decided, was something far more ordinary. Somewhere during those weeks, Maya had learned how I took my coffee, and I had learned the difference between her tired smile and her real one. I called that friendship. At the time, it seemed like a perfectly sufficient word. Friendship was a comfortable word, and I became very skilled at fitting increasingly inconvenient details inside it. One evening, Maya stood beside me at the kitchen counter, while we argued over which movie to watch. She held her phone between us, scrolling through choices with the concentration of someone negotiating international policy. You rejected 4 comedies, she said. They looked exhausting. You rejected the documentary. I lived through enough of that decade. I do not require a documentary explaining it to me. Maya laughed and leaned closer to show me another option. Her shoulder brushed mine. It was nothing. A small accidental contact between 2 people standing in a kitchen. Yet I became aware of it with ridiculous precision. The warmth through her sweater. The faint scent of her shampoo. The way her voice softened because she was standing close enough that she did not need to speak loudly. I reached for my wineglass at the same moment Maya did. Our fingers touched around the stem. We both stopped. Maya looked at me. I looked at her hand, then her face. The pause lasted perhaps 1 second. My body treated it as considerably longer. Sorry, she said quietly. You were closer. That is generally how reaching works. The dryness in my voice made her smile, and the moment loosened. I took the glass and stepped toward the sofa, telling myself I was merely unaccustomed to sharing space. That explanation lasted until the following Sunday. Maya arrived wearing a navy coat with a pale thread caught near the collar. We were halfway through a conversation when I noticed it. Without thinking, I reached up and removed it. Maya went still. So did I. My hand was suddenly suspended inches from her shoulder. Her eyes met mine, warm and curious, without teasing. I dropped my hand. Thread, I said. Maya glanced at her collar. Thank you. It was distracting. Of course it was. She did not make more of it, which somehow made me more conscious of it. Later, she introduced me to a phrase she claimed everyone her age used. I informed her that 32 was far too old to represent everyone under 40. She responded by asking whether I had personally witnessed the invention of voicemail. I threatened to revoke her blue mug privileges. She looked genuinely alarmed. Our age difference existed in moments like that, not as a problem but as 2 sets of references we enjoyed trading. I gave her old movies she had somehow missed. She gave me music I would once have dismissed before hearing 10 seconds. Neither of us was becoming the other. We were simply making room. That evening, Maya left earlier than usual because she had work to finish. After she crossed the hall, I found her scarf folded over the arm of my sofa. I picked it up and opened my door to return it, then stopped. Her door had already closed. I could have knocked. Instead, I folded the scarf neatly beside her usual seat, knowing she would probably come looking for it tomorrow. Only later did I recognize what was strange about that decision. I had chosen to keep something of Maya's in my apartment because I liked knowing she had a reason to come back. The next evening, Maya retrieved her scarf, stayed for dinner, and left before 8 because she had an early meeting. By then, her coming and going had become ordinary enough that I barely registered the pattern until Thursday broke it. I arrived home shortly after 6, changed clothes and began making pasta. Without thinking, I measured enough for 2 people. I noticed only after the water started boiling. Excellent planning, Claire, I muttered. I could save the extra portion for lunch. Perfectly reasonable. At 6:45, I set the table and placed 2 glasses beside the plates. I stared at the second glass. Maya had never said she was coming over. We had made no plans. I returned it to the cabinet. 7:15 passed. I ate alone and read several pages of a novel without remembering any of them. At 7:30, the elevator sounded in the hallway. I looked toward my door before I could stop myself. Footsteps passed without slowing. Not Maya. I returned to my book. 10 minutes later, I checked my phone. No message. I immediately resented myself for checking. Maya had a life. She had work, friends, obligations, and places to be that did not involve my kitchen or my blue mug. I had spent years defending the same independence for myself. Surely I was capable of surviving one Thursday evening without monitoring the hallway like an overly invested security guard. I cleaned the kitchen. The extra pasta went into a container. Then I opened the cabinet for tea and saw Maya's blue mug. I took it down automatically before realizing what I had done. I stood there holding it, irritated by the evidence in my own hand. This is ridiculous. I put it back. At 8:20, I turned on Maya's playlist. Track 3 began, the piano melody I had once denied replaying. The apartment immediately felt less empty, which was not reassuring. Before Maya, silence had been something I chose. Now I found myself listening through it for an elevator, footsteps, 3 quick knocks. I tried reading again. At 9, I heard laughter in the hallway and looked up. Someone entered an apartment farther down. I checked my phone once more, then placed it face down on the table as though disciplining an object could restore my dignity. That was when the uncomfortable truth began forming. I was not worried about Maya. Nothing had happened. She had simply not appeared. The problem was that somewhere during those ordinary evenings of soup, music, wine, books, and arguments about movies, I had started expecting her. I had built her into the architecture of my day without noticing the construction. At 9:20, I went to the kitchen for water and found myself taking down 2 glasses again. This time I did not put the second one back. I left it on the counter beside the blue mug and stared at the absurd little arrangement. Then the elevator sounded once more. Footsteps entered the hallway. I knew Maya's rhythm before they reached my door. 3 quick knocks followed. I was already halfway across the room. I reached the door before the second set of knocks had fully faded. That alone should have warned me. I usually approach doors with the measured suspicion of someone expecting either a delivery she had forgotten ordering or a problem she had no intention of adopting. That night I opened mine immediately. Maya stood there with wind-reddened cheeks, her coat still buttoned, and an apologetic smile. Sorry. Work turned into dinner, dinner turned into another meeting, and apparently nobody respects Thursday anymore. A national tragedy, I said. She laughed, then glanced past me. Her eyes moved toward the kitchen counter. The second glass. The blue mug. The container of pasta I had conveniently failed to hide. When she looked back at me, her expression had changed by only a fraction, but I had learned enough about Maya to recognize amusement before she allowed herself to show it. Claire. No, I have not asked anything yet. I am saving us both time. Her smile widened. Were you waiting for me? There it was. A perfectly ordinary question that somehow made the entire apartment go quiet. I could have denied it. 3 weeks earlier, I would have denied it beautifully. I would have produced a sensible explanation involving leftovers, hydration, coincidence, and the statistical probability of owning more than 1 glass. Instead, I looked at the evidence scattered around my kitchen and discovered that dignity has limits. I made too much pasta. Maya glanced toward the container. Of course you did. It happens. To you. Occasionally. Since when? I gave her a look. She smiled but did not push. That was one of the things I had begun to understand about her. Maya noticed doors without demanding that they open. She simply waited to see whether I would choose to. So I stepped aside. Are you hungry? A little. Then stopped standing in the hallway. She entered and I closed the door behind her. I reheated the pasta while Maya removed her coat and settled onto her familiar stool. Without thinking, I reached for the blue mug and poured her tea. She noticed that too. She said nothing. Somehow her silence was worse. Or better. I was beginning to lose track. I turned on the playlist before she could suggest music. Maya looked up. You voluntarily chose track 3? Do not make this unpleasant. Her laugh followed me across the kitchen, warm and familiar. And standing there, listening to music I once considered noise, watching a woman I once considered an interruption drink from a mug that had somehow become hers, I finally understood one small truth. I had spent years believing peace meant nobody needing anything from me. I had never considered that peace might also mean wanting someone to arrive. I still had no name for what Maya was becoming to me. I only knew that somewhere between her door and mine, I had stopped protecting every empty space in my life. Some of them, without realizing it, I had begun saving for her. Thank you for staying with Claire and Maya through this chapter of their story. If their journey moved you, please subscribe to the channel and share this story with someone who might enjoy it. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories like this to life.